Welcome back, Mando.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mevartic Gar. Welcome to our 288th Suburbia Escaping and Pirate Plundering episode of Mando Vision. I'm your host, Nargai Tom. Thank you so much for checking out the small, independent Star Wars podcast. We're so glad you're here. Reach out to us on the socials, Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram, MandoVision no underscore on the blue sky. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. Bucketheads, welcome back. It is, as we record this episode, the day after the 2-episode premiere of Star Wars Skeleton Crew, the latest in the Disney Plus series of Star Wars shows. And we're here to have a discussion about it. I'm fired up for it. And, well, listen, we wanted to have a conversation. We were hoping to have a friend come on and join us to kind of get into these episodes. It's not going to happen this week. Some unfortunate changes in my schedule have made that a little bit challenging. But I'm hoping that next week we'll be able to link up with one of our good friends and begin to have a more well-rounded discussion of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. And I think next week's episode will be a good one to have a guest come on with us and really kind of get into it, because I know that to many more reputable media outlets than us, they have seen the first 3 episodes of the show already. So that feels like if that's what Disney did for certain media people, it seems like that's probably more of a natural breaking point in sort of like the first act of a 3-act structure right there. Those first 3 episodes. Because, again, we have 8 overall. So, when we get that 3rd episode next week, we will hopefully have a friend come on with us. But for now, you're stuck with me to get into these first 2 episodes. And we're going to try and tackle them in order. We will talk about both episodes in this show. But, again, we'll try to keep it confined to episode 1, episode 2 talk, with a clear dividing line in the middle. Otherwise, for all my American friends out there, I hope you had a great, wonderful, and safe Thanksgiving. Everyone else, I hope you enjoyed that Thursday. Hope it was a great Thursday for you. I think it's only fair that we kind of get into this, which means we're going to get the episode particulars out of the way right now so that we can just have our conversation after the bump and just really kind of get into it. So, that being said, Skeleton Crew, episode 1, this could be a real adventure. Directed by John Watts, written by Christopher Ford and John Watts. And in case you don't know those names, watch some Spider-Man, because that's what we got going on here. Episode 2, Way Out Past the Barrier. This one directed by David Lowery. Again, written by Christopher Ford and John Watts. David Lowery, who did the, Peter Pan and Mary movie, I believe. Super cool, good flick. And that's one of the vibes that I definitely picked up from these first 2 episodes. Particularly episode 2 was sort of like the big Peter Pan, Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride, not the movie, vibes we get from the pirate station, that sort of doubles as Tortuga, doubles as Pirate Island. We'll talk about more when we get into our episode 2 talk. But an interesting directorial choice to kind of help sort of set that tone for the series. Now, we by and large, every media outlet, us included, have talked about like what seems to be the influences on the show, the sort of Amblin, 80s kids on bikes movies that have sort of inspired the series. It's sort of our jumping off point for a Star Wars adventure in a very new fashion. And I think those feelings are very strong. You got a little Goonies, a little Explorers. I mentioned in episode 2 the big Peter Pan vibes that I pick up. a little bit of Hook, a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean. Again, more the ride than the movie, but so far that's where we're at so far. But we also get like a really nice mystery out of these first episodes that I sort of wasn't expecting. Again, I intentionally avoid articles that may share a little bit too much information before something drops. So this could all be news that was out there ahead of time. And I'm particularly talking about the planet where the children hail from. Again, we'll talk more about that as that episode, or as we get into our discussion, and as that mystery kind of begins to take form. But I'll be honest, I was very delighted by these first two episodes. They were pretty straightforward. Not a lot that we didn't really get from the trailers. But again, that mystery that sort of underlies this adventure that the children are on, I'm completely fascinated with that. I want to see where that goes. I like our cast of characters. I like our tertiary characters. I like that we're exploring the New Republic era, and that we're looking at the pirate side of things, like sort of like that underbelly side of the galaxy. The New Republic's in control, the Empire's on the run, but we're not dealing with any of that. At least not to that point. Like this is a pocket, a corner of the galaxy that we get a break from all of that, at least to an extent, in these first two episodes. We'll see how the larger galaxy at play, if they stay out of this, or if they do get involved at some point. I would imagine they get involved at some point, because once you have pirates out in the in the Outer Rim causing trouble, if you're the governing body of the galaxy, you're going to take notice of that. And I would imagine, and again, we've seen X-Wings in the trailers, but to what extent, to what context, we do not know yet. But yeah, overall, this is gonna be a very positive review. I like what I've seen so far. I like the kids. I like the pirates. The glimpses we got of Jude Law have been great. I like all of it. And again, like the Amblin movies, that's my wheelhouse. That's my childhood. So maybe I'm a little predisposed to like it. But guess what else was a part of my childhood? Star Wars. So putting these two things together right now is chocolate and peanut butter. I'm all in. I'm digging it. I like what we see. And I'm ready to talk about the episodes in more depth right now on the other side of the bump. So you know what that means, my friends. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off.
You're going to have to relocate the covert.
This is the way.
This is the way.
Now, before we begin properly, I do want to mention that there are absolutely a ton of Easter eggs in these first two episodes, particularly when it comes to like callbacks and homages to the original trilogy. We get to see a ton of species from the original trilogy. We got Ishi-Tibs, we got Weequays and Nectos and Snivians and Quarren are in this. I mean, it's the Star Wars cantina sort of brought to life yet again, but it also expanded upon because so many creatures, species return. Most prominently, and perhaps to my great delight, the introduction of Brutus, the Shastivan pirate. Very happy to see the intergalactic werewolf back in action and kicking some serious booty in the cold open for this first episode. Love the way this episode opens with a galactic a pirate boarding, right? Like something we had yearly not explored too deeply in Star Wars just yet. Love seeing all that. Love the way the ship tried to defend itself. Love the way that they tried to repel the boarders. Again, it reminded me very much of pirate movies of the past. It reminded me of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but in space. And again, seeing those creatures rushing through the tubes, entering the ship they're trying to board to get that treasure. I loved all of it. I thought it was a great introduction. We get to see, again, the Shastivan Brutus. I believe Gunter's in this, played by Jaleel White. Urkel himself, a mainstay of the 80s and 90s, back in Star Wars. So yeah, tons of Easter eggs and things like that. So we'll talk about them as they are related to our stories. Right now, it's just a visual eye candy. It's fun for you guys to watch it, pick it up yourself, see which ones kind of resonate with you. We won't get into them too specifically unless they are, in my opinion, more significant to the overall story or more significant to something somewhere else, something that might tease something in another part of the Star Wars galaxy. So again, there's just too many to list, honestly. Like it's a cornucopia visually of Star Wars Easter eggs and alien species that we are big fans of here on the podcast. So bear that in mind. But yeah, the cold open, great way to introduce us to the show. We are introduced to Captain Silvo with his helmet on, trying to create a mystery of some sort. I think it's a very basic mystery. We're not supposed to get too hung up on it. Because, yeah, I'm pretty sure, like 99.9999% sure this is Jude Law's character. This is the Nawood character that we are introduced to later in the series. He's leading these pirates. He's promised them credits. He's promised to get them everything they deserve, right, under his leadership. And then after intimidating a member of the crew of the ship, they have raided the New Republic ship. They open a magnetically sealed vault and find one lone credit. Not enough to feed these hungry pirates, that's for sure. So they mutiny, and we see Silva fight against his crew as they turn on him. And then we cut away, not knowing his final fate. But take note, the camera goes in really close on what that Republic credit looks like, and it is significant. It is sort of a clue to what we see later in this first episode. Now we cut to Ad-Aten and a planet suburbia, basically. Something we've not seen in Star Wars, something that may be controversial to some people in the audience, like the idea of suburbia in Star Wars. And I think, honestly, it plays a lot into the greater mystery of Ad-Aten and its role in this series. But it's a very unique planet visually from what we've seen in Star Wars so far. The first thing that I noticed, and I think is now significant as we got a little bit more context to the mystery of Ad-Aten, is that no skylanes. We don't see ships coming in and out of Ad-Aten like it's some kind of port. Now, you could explain that, like, oh, they're just away from the hustle and bustle of a city where there are more ports of entry and the skylanes would be more prominent. But thus far, even on Alderaan, we saw skylanes. We saw ships in the air. We don't see ships in the air on Ad-Aten at all. In fact, even with the exception of the kids' hover bikes, the cars, the vehicles that the parents have, the transports that they have, they're on guided rails. Like, these guys aren't doing anything. I mean, this is a planet that has something going on, some kind of overwhelming sense of security about it that is very un-Star Wars-like, but I think intentionally part of the mystery of the show. And we get into that fairly quickly when we go to the school, when we have the conversation with Undersecretary Farah, and how she explains how all these kids are about to take their placement exams, basically, to determine the course of their lives. Something that is familiar to people of my generation, the placement exams, the ASVABs as we had them, and something that seems very important to Ad-Aten as we get to hear the term the Great Works. And again, they talk about the Republic, they talk about the Great Work, but it feels like there's going to be a disconnect, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We're introduced to our kids. We're introduced to Wim and Neil. They're best friends. They play Star Wars together, basically. Like, they have Jedi lightsaber fights, waiting for the bus to pick them up for school. We see Fern and KB, and they're on their hover bikes. They are a little bit more the rebels, in a sense, right? Like, they're trying. It feels like they are fighting, but rebellion is a strong word, but like, they kind of push back a little bit against the system, the institutions that their parents have put into place, the institutions that the local government has put into place. But Fern, again, something that we see about this character, she is tough and independent and free thinking, but she won't show that to her mother. The way she rushes home, puts on her school uniform, retests the droid reprograms the droid, basically has an algorithm to rewrite the droid's memory so that the droid can lie for Fern. It's all really interesting. I like the dynamic between the two friend groups, right? Wim and Neil, Fern and KB, and then when they get thrown together, they obviously clash at first. So it's not like Goonies in the sense that like everyone's friends already. No, no, no. They are gonna butt heads a little bit as they sort of learn their new dynamic being thrown together on this adventure. So I like a lot of that. It's fun, fun, fun. We see Wendell, the Wim's overbearing. I don't know. Maybe not so much overbearing, but very protective of his child, but very much wants his child to stay in his lane, do what he's supposed to do, so that Wendell can be at work and do all those reviews he has to do. And then obviously Fern's mother is Under Secretary Farah, who we don't get to see a ton of in this episode. But I think we'll play more wholly into the mystery of what's going on at Atten, as I think Farah and Wendell will end up being the ones who have to kind of start to pull back the layers of what exactly is going on at Atten, what exactly is the great work, what's it for, who's it benefiting, all these things. Like again, Atten mystery is just sort of very lightly teased at in this episode, but it's intriguing. I want to know more about it. One of the big scenes in this episode, again, one of those visual things I wanted to mention, again, how we focused when we were in the cold open on that Republic credit. Well, there's a scene where Wendell tells Wim as they're getting ready to go about their days, Wendell to work, Wim to school. Wendell's going to be working late, so he's going to give Wim some credits, his lunch money for the week. Those credits, my friends, do not look like the Republic credit we saw. So our first sort of clue that something on Atten is a little bit different. Those credits that Wim gets are very shiny. They're smaller. They're longer. They're more rectangular. The Republic credit was sort of a dull metal, right? It was a square, like almost like a chit. And again, our first clue that something's not quite what it seems on at Atten. So how do our friends get thrown together? Well, they get in trouble, of course. Wim oversleeps the day of the placement exam. He's very stressed out about it. He didn't know about it. He gets wrapped up in reading his adventures of Jedi and other things going on in the galaxy. Of what little they know that goes on outside the galaxy. They know tales of Jedi, but they don't seem to know too much. Everything seems to be focused on learning at school what these droids teach you. By the way, truancy droids, there's an interesting concept. I don't even know if kids these days would know what a truancy officer is. That's probably something their parents had to explain to them right there, watching this episode of the show, the idea of truancy droids. But yeah, Wim oversleeps. He's sort of panicking. He's trying to cram everything he can into this session so that he does well on this placement test that he knows his father wants him to do well on. And he oversleeps. He misses the bus. We see Neil in the back of the bus. And Wims decides he's going to take a shortcut because he saw Fern and KB on their hoverbikes take off through the woods but still get to school before them. So he knows a shortcut exists, but he doesn't really know how to get there. So he's on his bike. I love the way that from the view of the bus the day before, Wim sees Fern and KB like launch themselves off a ramp and down into the woods. I love that. That's not quite Wim's speed. He stops his bike, he picks up his bike, he puts it over the railing, and then goes down into the thing in a very haphazard fashion because this is not how Wim usually rolls. On his way, he's going. He doesn't know which way he's going. He doesn't know what he's doing. Well, he crashes his bike into a crevasse, a ravine, if you will, and this is where we find what he believes is the entrance to a Jedi temple because that's what he's focused on. That's what that's where his head is at. And a truancy droid shows up, picks him up, takes him to his office. The office of the proctor. Fern is also there for getting in trouble. It's a whole thing. But this is where Fern learns once Wim has a conversation with Wendell. Wendell doesn't want to hear it, but to try to get out of trouble, Wim says that he found a Jedi temple. That's why he was late. That's why things are going on. Wendell has no time for it, but Fern, ears perk up. So later on in the episode, when we find when Wim and Neil go back to and dig out their Jedi temple to gain access to the Jedi temple, who's already there? Fern and KB, and sort of the childlike back and forth of who has dibs on the temple. So let's talk about Fern and KB and why they're there. Fern, obviously, he's trying to prove a lot to herself and to others. She's involved in hoverbike racing, but her power converter's bad, so she needs to get a new one, or she can have the race with the town bully that she needs to have to kind of help prove herself. KB is the one character thus far who's not super fleshed out. We see Wim's family dynamic. We see a little bit of Fern and Neil's family dynamics. We don't know much about KB's just yet at this point. She has her cool visor that helps her see things in a different way. That's all we really know about KB's thus far. I want to also mention the day before the test, when Undersecretary Farah is speaking to the class. Wendell is the one child who expresses a desire to do something that's not expected, that is not part of the great works. Like everyone's like, I want to be an analyst. I want to be a, I don't know, algorithm builder person thing. It all sounded very technical. And if anyone knows what the droids were actually teaching, reach out to me because it was way above my pay grade. So if that was actual real math or anything, let me know. I'm kind of curious. But yeah, Wim is the one child who expresses a desire to help people. And Neil sort of calls him on it. And he's like, you told him you want to be a Jedi. And so it's a pretty funny moment back and forth between those characters. Like I said, the dynamic between the kids, really strong. And that's what this first episode is all about. Introducing these kids and throwing them together and getting us ready for this big adventure. So we get introduced to the pirates. We get introduced to the kids. We get introduced to the family. All the players are in place. And we also get teased on this mystery of Ad-Adden, just a little bit, more so in episode 2. Now, of course, the kids eventually do gain entry, thanks to KB and her special visor that lets her access the power source to open the door, and they begin to explore the ship. We see SM-33. He's not working yet. Nothing's functioning on the ship. It's infested. There's little rat guys running around. It's dirty as dusty. We don't see the dead pirates yet, but they're in there. and I love that we're actually like upside down in the ship, right? Like whatever happened to the ship, however it crashed, it was like not pretty and it didn't go well. And the mystery of the Onyx Cinder, which is the name of the ship, which hasn't been revealed yet, but it is on the Star Wars database. That's an element of the Ad-Adden mystery that I can't wait to explore a little bit more fully as well. So a lot goes on, a lot happens. Eventually, we get the power on, and Wim can't resist. Fern tells him not to touch anything. He sees a flashing green light. You're a child. You don't like being told what to do. You push the button. And what does that do? That begins a sequence that powers up the ship and begins to have it rise from the ground. Meanwhile, Wendell comes home, can't find Wim, goes into the woods looking for him, finds his helmet that got knocked off earlier in the episode, and stumbles across the area where this ship is beginning to rise from the ground. And the kids are trying to run out of the port. They don't want to go. They don't want to get stuck on this thing that's taken off. They don't even realize it's a ship yet. They just think it's like a giant earthquake, basically. Until they get out, and they realize they're on a starship, and it's getting ready to leave. And that's when Wim sees his father. So Wendell sees the children in the ship, taking off for space, and that's basically where the episode ends. Now, again, we get some other mysteries here. We know that Adden also is behind a barrier. How this ship gets past that barrier, that is an element that we need to get explored. I suspect it has something to do. There's some kind of magic transponder that this ship has. But we'll get into that, I suspect, down the road as we find out as we get more answers to the mystery of Adden and the mystery of the pirates who went searching for it, right? Because that's an element of this mystery that we want to explore as well. And what happened to the crew of the Onyx Cinder when they got to Adden? Getting through the barrier, bring them down? Like, what happened exactly that this ship ended up buried? It is interesting that Fern has all these stories. A lot of them are lies, it seems like. So I wonder if this is a character that is just messing with Wim. Even KB at one point says you didn't have to be so mean to the boys. But it does have a very boys versus girls power struggle in these early episodes, particularly in episode 2 when Fern begins to sort of like assert more of a leadership position, a little bit to Wim's chagrin. But I think this is a strong first episode. Again, we escape from suburbia by the end, and I think that's a good thing. I don't think lingering there was ideal. Again, unfortunate that we don't have any more background on KB, other than she likes to tinker in her garage on Fern's hover bike. But we get a sense of the family dynamic that Fern has, that Neil has, and that Wim has. Obviously, Wim and Fern are our two primary characters thus far. And we take it off. We rocket away from Ad-Aden into hyperspace, and that's basically the end of the episode. But there's a lot of things that I think are in this episode that we can all connect with as people who were at once children at some point. The fear of tests, the fear of potentially just following in your parents' footsteps, right? That's something that I think we've all kind of pushed back against at certain points in our life. So the children's stuff I think is very relatable. And while the story centers around children, it doesn't feel like children's television. And I think that's a very important distinction for Skeleton Crew, because I think sometimes when we see kids as the primary characters that we get concerned that it's a kids show. And while Star Wars has always been focused on kids, it's always been able to be enjoyed by adults. And I think that works in this show's favor. Like, it has the stuff for a younger audience to get them engaged with the show. But for adults, we're going to be able to connect with these characters too, and their experiences and again, their family dynamics. There's something there for, I think, all of us to kind of latch onto. Wim in particular is a character that I think I can connect with pretty easily as a bit of a latchkey kid, and a kid who gets who latches on to fantasy. That rings a bell in my childhood. So easily relatable, which is a really strong connecting point for me with this series. But this mystery that they're hinting at, again, I go back to the credits that Wendell gives to Wim. They are very visually different than the Republic credit that we see at the beginning of the show, which I think is our first clue that something else is going on Ad-Aden, that there's something about Ad-Aden, this planet behind a barrier, where there are no skylings, there are no starships coming in and out of the planet. Seems to be isolated, seems to be removed from the larger galaxy on purpose. But whose intent was this? Those are the mysteries that we want to get into. Those are what we want to start to pull the layers back on. And we get some big information in episode 2, which is what we're going to talk about next.
I would like to see the baby.
So now we get into the second episode where our group of heroes is thrown together, and now they have to begin the difficult transition of being on opposite sides of everything to now having to work together to overcome the adversity before them. Now, initially, there is a lot of finger pointing as Wim is quickly and clearly indicated as the one who got them into this mess, now has them stranded in the middle of nowhere in space. I love the way the show opens with them screaming as they take off for light speed, which is something that's never happened to any of them before, so they don't quite understand what it is they're seeing. Then they come out, they refer to, hyperspace is something that sounds more theoretical than practical, which is very interesting and shows us sort of another glimpse that things on Ad-Aden aren't what they seem. Like these characters are far more isolated from what is known about the galaxy than not. We get another taste of that once we actually get to oh my God, can't even read my own notes, to Port Borgo later in the episode, because again, we're gonna get a little bit more taste of that, and it's we'll talk about it as we get to it. Let me not get ahead of myself. So we're in the middle of nowhere, no one knows what to do, and then they hear a thumping, because now that the power's back on, that quote unquote dead droid that they saw in episode 1 is now powered up, and he's making his way back to the cockpit. He sees the kids, he registers them as intruders, and he goes looking for his captain so he can know what to do. And this is when Fern asserts herself as the leader of this group and says, "Hey, I'm the captain now." Not so much in that direct fashion, but asserts herself as the captain. She killed the previous captain, so now she's the captain, and she's not. And that droid's not throwing anyone out of the airlock. That droid's name, by the way, SM-33, voiced by the great Nick Frost. And SM-33, Snee, like from Hook, like from Peter Pan. And there we go. More overt references to that series. To series. You know what I mean. It's so silly. But now they want SM-33 to show them how to fly the ship. He tries to. It's a lot for them to take in. There's a lot of different thrusters on that ship. Let me tell you what. So Fern, as the new captain of the ship, instructs Borgo against initially something she declines to do, but since SM-33 does not know how to get back to At-Aten, seems to not have the memory banks of how he got to At-Aten on that ship. They're at a bit of a loss. So I think Fern begrudgingly accepts 33's offer to go to Port Borgo, not realizing that Port Borgo, the spaceport as he calls it, that they're going to is actually like, Pirate Island, Tortuga, kind of all smushed together into one thing. Not realizing that they're going to a pirate haven. She just wants to go someplace where she can ask for directions to At-Aten. And again, we don't know how long the Onyx Cinder and 33 were down there underneath the surface of that planet. But it is interesting that there's no records in his database of said planet. Part of the mystery of At-Aten gets expanded. And it gets full-blown opened up once we get to Port Borgo. Visually, it's exciting. It's thrilling. The first 2 episodes look spectacular. Like, I really think they put a lot of time and effort into the visual effects for this series. I know the show was delayed a bit, and maybe that gave them more time to put some polish on it. But the show looks fantastic, and thus far, the way that John Watts and David Lowery have shot the show, very cinematic too. It doesn't look like a TV show at all. It's visually interesting, visually exciting, and seeing, we got a taste of some new visuals when we saw the pirate boarding process. Those pirates that launched themselves into space to blow up the turret gun. And we kind of continue on that new, exciting visuals in this episode as we make our way into Port Borgo. Very dynamic visually. The aliens that are interacting on the planet, more throwbacks to, early episodes, but also an introduction of a ton new species as well. So we're sort of expanding our Star Wars beings, sentient species catalog just by being in the space station. And it's very, very cool. Again, more just like in the first episode. More Easter eggs, more throwbacks, more callbacks, more homages to things. It's a visual smorgasbord. So soak it all in and be like, oh yeah, I remember that from so-and-so. I remember this from so-and-so. Very, very cool stuff. Is it germane to our plot? Not yet. Not necessarily. But yeah, this episode is very much Stranger in a Strange Land, a fish out of water. These kids getting the first taste of a larger galaxy. Again, their reaction to all the alien species, where I think it was Neil who's like, the aliens look so weird. They're completely thrown off. They're only used to the species that inhabit At-Aten, which again we've seen several different ones for sure. It's not like it's a human only kind of planet. But the diversity, the cacophony that is around them is something completely new to them. And so I love them exploring the fort. I love them making their way around and seeing the things and trying to stay out of trouble and realizing that they are not at the type of spaceport that they thought they would be. It's at this point I want to interject here too really quickly because as has been the case with many, many, many of the Star Wars shows on Disney+, the runtime on this series thus far runs wildly all over the place. The first episode was about 45-ish minutes. This episode, like 28-ish. So it's a really fast-paced episode, and it gets us where we need to go. But man, I would have loved a little bit more time to play on Borgo and kind of have a little bit more of a conversation with some of these pirates that I suspect we'll probably get in the third episode. But more on that to be talked about in next week's episode, I imagine. But basically, here's where the kid's going to get themselves into trouble, and where we get our first like real evidence that there's something going on with At-Aten, and that not all is what it seems. Neil and Wim try to get some food. They have to pay for said food. So what does Wim do? He breaks out the lunch money that his dad gave him, and the reaction he gets from said credit is quite impressive. Initially from the cook, who then tries to shake them down for more, but another patron of the restaurant grabs the credit, looks at it, and was like, "Hey, this is Old Republic money in mint condition. Where did you get this from?" And all of a sudden, Wim and Neil are characters of great interest in Port Borgo. Meanwhile, KB and Fern, they have observed several different things on Port Borgo that has their interest, their eyes. But someone caught interest of Fern as well. What I can only imagine is a lady of the night makes her way over to Fern and it begins to ask her questions. Now, I agree with Fern. It does definitely seem like that woman is trying to kidnap them. I get big kidnapping vibes off of that. Maybe she's trying to be a good person and get them off of Borgo before the pirates realize who they are and sell them into slavery. But like Fern, I would suspect that a lady trying to drag me to a spaceship is trying to sell me into slavery too. But this is when Fern just lets them know that they're trying to go home. And where's home? And when they say the name Ad-Aden, that is when we get the big reveal that Ad-Aden's a myth. People don't believe it's real. It's like some kind of lost world with hidden treasure, the kind of thing that pirates dream of. So all of a sudden, these kids are of significant importance. Meanwhile, Neil and Wim make their escape from the table. The pirates are in hot pursuit, including Vane, who we remember from The Mandalorian. Everyone in hot pursuit. And this is when SM-33 makes his arrival on Port Borgo to defend his captain. And we get to see a glimpse of that combat scene that we saw in one of the trailers of SM-33 just kicking some serious pirate booty. Good stuff. But all for naught as he is rendered inert at a certain point, and the kids are captured and thrown into the brig, where they come across a hooded stranger who's not yet introduced himself, but we recognize that voice. We recognize that image on the screen. This is Jod Nanawood, a.k.a. Captain Silvo. I'm very confident in that statement. Who uses the Force to get the key. Is it the Force, or is there some sort of trick going on here? I don't necessarily know if I believe that Jod is necessarily a Jedi yet. I part of me thinks there's a scam. There's an angle he's playing on these kids' hopes and dreams. But again, really only works for Wim, because I don't know how much the other kids really believe in the Jedi stuff. Neil, obviously, because he's involved in the friendship with Wim, and they play Jedi and Sith all the time. I don't know how the girls feel about this. I suspect there's more to Jod and his Force powers. Will he divulge that he was a pirate? He was Captain Silvo at the beginning of episode 1. We don't know, because that's where the episode ends, is the children deciding he's a Jedi, he's got the key, and they're getting out of there. But what's his angle going to be? Obviously, he is just as intrigued by the story these kids are talking about, Ad-Aden, this legendary mythological hidden world that's supposed to be full of all kinds of treasures. Meanwhile, back on Ad-Aden, Wendell, taken in by the droids, trying to get help for his kids, talks about a spaceship. This is obviously like a red alert moment on Ad-Aden, as Wendell's taken into see a supervisor of some sort. But again, the look you get from those security droids is that when they hear spaceship, it's kind of like a red alert moment. So we're going to pull that layer back as the show plays out. But yeah, the mystery, this hidden world, these kids are from a hidden world of vast wealth, according to the myths, according to the legends. And that is going to be of keen interest to the pirates. Thus far, I really dig this show. I give episode 1 8 buckets. I give episode 2 8.5 buckets. Digging the vibe, digging everything. Not a big fan of the inconsistencies with the runtimes, but there's a lot here that I do like. The dynamic between the characters, the visuals look fantastic. It's an exciting new adventure for Star Wars. I suspect I'm going to hear a lot of people that I know talking about how it doesn't feel Star Wars to them. I will once again reference the fact that I believe Star Wars has many, many flavors and many, many feels, and give this show a chance to shake out. I love so far that we are removed from the New Republic, the Imperial Remnant, the vast intergalactic politics of the New Republic era so far, because I want us to focus on that mystery of Ad-Aden, and why is it a hidden world? Why was it tucked away? How long has it been hidden? They still have Old Republic credits in mint condition. Is this a result of the Clone Wars? Is this a result of something, far longer, far older? Is this some sort of, I don't know. There's a lot of mysteries here. There's a lot of directions we could go in. Is this a machination of Palpatine's to keep these people isolated? What is the great work that they believe that they are striving for and achieving on this secret world with no sky lanes and spaceports? The Ad-Aden mystery, I think, is going to become a really big driving element of the show and my enjoyment of it. I dig the kids. I dig their adventure trying to get home. But where does adventure take them? Because now that they're about to cut a deal with Jod, I suspect it won't be a straightforward let's get you home kind of thing. There's going to be some side quests. There's going to be some missteps. But obviously Jod wants to get them home because he needs to redeem himself as the Pirate King, right? Is that where we're going with? Is that going to be the story here? I don't know. I'm intrigued. I'm fascinated by it. I really like the things we get into in this episode. The sort of all the things it teases out. But what's going to be interesting looking forward to the third episode, the one that a lot of other media outlets, not named Mandovision, got that we don't, is how the kids are going to work with Jod. I suspect Fern will not be very trusting of Jod. I suspect that Wim will be overly trusting of Jod, believing him to be a Jedi. So what's the deal they're going to broker? How is their dynamic going to work together? And I'm really just looking forward to seeing Jude Law charm the crap out of me. That's what I want to see in the next episode. Jude Law, an actor, I've always enjoyed his work, even in movies that weren't my cup of tea. Jude Law's always been great. So can't wait to see what's in the next installment of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. I have enjoyed these first 2 episodes, and I very sincerely hope next week we're going to have one of our friends come on and join us, and we'll have a round table, very short round table discussion on these first 3 episodes with an emphasis on episode 3. But yeah, that'd be really, really nice to have a little conversation and kind of get the feel for another Star Wars fan and how they're interpreting and enjoying the series thus far. But I think it's off to a really good start. I really like what we got going on so far. I think the show has a lot of potential, which I know is a word that gets thrown around a lot. But so far, I think these first 2 episodes have the goods. Overall, like when we were reviewing The Acolyte, when we were talking about The Acolyte, it was a lot of ups and downs. It was a lot of, I like this, but I didn't like this. So far, this show, not a lot that I'm not liking. And that's good. So a lot of positives. I'm excited for what the potential here. Again, we have 8 episodes. We have a good mystery. We have a really good cast of characters with a good dynamic together. And I can't wait to see Jude Law. I can't wait to see more of the pirates, more of the throwbacks. Again, we mentioned Jaleel White's character, Gunter. He's in this. He's prominent in this episode for identifying the kids. I want to see what he gets to do in this series. I want to see Captain Brutus. I want to see more of that guy. What's Vane's role going to be? And again, as we pull back that mystery of Ad-Aden as the kids make their way home, very excited. Oh, and like the Onyx Cinder, how did it get there? How could it get past the barrier? What happened to the pirates on that ship? There's a lot in this show. The mysteries I'm very intrigued by, much more so than I was the mysteries of The Acolyte. I'll be honest. I tried with that show. I gave it everything I had. I still wish it had season 2, but this show is speaking to me in a different way, and I hope it's speaking to you in a different way, because I would really like it if we could just have a Star Wars show where the internet was just happy with what they were getting. I know it'll never happen, but I haven't looked for it yet either. I have not seen the negative detractors to this show. I'm hoping I don't have to. I like what we see so far. How do you guys feel about it? Reach out, hit me up on the socials. You know where I'm at. It's at Mando_Vision, Twitter/X and Instagram. Just Mandovision at Blue Sky. And you can email me. You have any long-form thoughts you want to get off your chest? MandovisionTom@gmail.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, sweet 5-star reviews. They're the best way to help a small independent podcast like us stand out and not get lost in the pure pirate shuffle. We'll go with pirate shuffle today. Otherwise, hey, my friends, it's December. The year's rocketing to a conclusion. Go out, be great Star Wars fans in this time of wonderful holiday cheer. And we'll be back next week, hopefully with a good friend in tow, to have a conversation about the third episode and the first 3 episodes overall of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. But in the meantime, remember, this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. You expect me to search the galaxy for the home of this creature and deliver it to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.